Welcome back, dear viewers. On this beautiful evening, we're joined by Nawaf Almahdi, an English instructor here in our beautiful Kuwait. Good evening to you, Nawaf. It's a pleasure to be having you here on Hala Kuwait.
Hi, Yusuf. It's good to be back in the studio.
That's great. And we want to know more about the EFL learning and a flipped classroom. So would you tell us, please, more about it?
Of course. So EFL stands for English as Foreign Language, which is the standardized model that is used by the Ministry of Education. The flipped classroom, and by definition, which is basically teaching classes in an online environment, and it has different models. The most popular ones, whether being synchronous, which is taught, for example, by Microsoft Teams or by Zoom, and the asynchronous one is basically where you record yourself, edit the video, and then publish it for the learners to watch it on their free time.
All right, that's pretty interesting and a new method really for our dear students watching us here today. I'm sure you all recognize your favorite teacher, Nawaf Almahdi, here on Hala Kuwait. So do you see, Nawaf Almahdi, a more interactive student engagement through these classrooms?
Well, I think it depends on the classrooms, but my classes, they're very interactive and they're engaged in my lessons, which is a good thing. But I think every school and every class is different, regardless of where you go. Also, the flipped classroom by itself, as a model, depends from one culture to the next. Okay? I mean, I've heard other teachers who complain about this issue, that they have a lot of students who are not even engaged or they're just sleeping during class. I'm sure we've seen the same model during COVID too. But I think it mostly works if you have a classroom that is mixed in learning. What I mean by this is that if you have a multiple nationalities learners in an EFL classroom, so for example, if you have a mix of Arabs, a mix of Europeans, a mix of African students, like in different nationalities in one classroom, the class will be a lot more engaging because they are forced to speak English. They're not forced to speak in one language. That's the thing.
All right, and English is the international language of the world, as they say. So from your perspective and teaching our beautiful students here in our beautiful Kuwait, do you see them having more competencies in learning English and communicating with each other?
Well, yeah, there is some competency, yes, but it's all about practice. I mean, I think one of the common issues why we have a lot of students here is because we don't really encourage them much to talk to foreigners. But I mean, if you look at kids today, they play online games with headsets and microphones, and oftentimes I'm sure they'd be competing against with competitors from other countries, and they're forced to speak English that way. Yeah.
All right. Yes, I do believe that because I usually actually play also online gaming, and everybody, all the community online speaks English. Therefore, you learn. And especially at the adventure games, Nawaf, what do you think about that?
Oh, I agree. Adventure games, MMO, the MMOROG games, the role-playing games, online games like like Final Fantasy, or these other games that have online communities. Whether there's a chat bot and the open mic option. Yeah, I think this is a very good tool to improve the. There's this method called the communicative language teaching, or CLT, where we teach learners how to use language chunks, like word chunks together, into forming legible sentences, which can be used for everyday scenarios. All
right. So Nawaf, we want to ask you more about these students, our lovely students, really here in our beautiful Kuwait, learning from your classes online. What kind of materials they have to come up with and bring it to the online lesson?
Right. Well, I think normally they should just open their student books. Now, the Ministry of Education has done an amazing job, by the way, of delivering books to our learners' homes. But at the same time, they were even able to provide them with online resources, like the PDF version of their their subject. The only thing that they need to do is just open their student book or workbook, on a laptop or an iPad while communicating with the teacher. Yes. But I think the material, most of it has to be developed by the teacher themselves. The thing with flipped classrooms is that you really need to be creative and find ways to engage learners. And I mean, imagine it's just like a regular classroom. The only difference is that there's a digital interface, your laptop.
Yes.
And most teachers nowadays, they use Microsoft tools, like PowerPoint, Word, and to deliver materials. And sometimes they would even incorporate other media platforms, like YouTube as an example, to teach listening or maybe explain a specific subject. And that way, yeah.
Yes, well, we really see this, Nawaf, in our teachers really and our students, the emphasis of our beautiful teachers here in Kuwait, dear viewers, representing the Ministry of Education, are doing a really great job teaching these students. I can see, Nawaf, these young people that speak English actually better than me, you know? Yeah, so we want to know more about the valuable outcomes that come from the students during writing and speaking classes.
Okay, now here's the thing. Actually, writing lessons are like the most sophisticated, or I would say it's a bit difficult for some teachers to teach it, you know, in an online environment. But if you know the methodology and how to engage them with it, it's going to be a lot more fun. And by the way, I've noticed a lot of students who are like this generation of students. Okay, they might be fast in, you know, when typing on a keyboard, but when it comes to lessons, they're a bit slow. And okay, let me give you an example of this, Yusuf. Is that back then, in the 1950s in the United States, they actually used to have something called typing classes, where they, you know, they would be training high school students how to type using a typewriter. And they would do the same thing when they were, you know, training secretaries back in the 1950s.
Yes.
You know, for the job of secretaries, they had to be very fast writers, and they had to be very articulate. They also have to be very concise when writing and make sure there are no grammar mistakes. But returning to your question, designing a writing task or a writing lesson for EFL classrooms in a flipped classroom, if you know how to engage learners with it within this lesson, you're going to be doing a spectacular job. I think one of the methods we can teach them is, for example, how to write a formal email for a job application, or a formal email to send it, you know, to when applying for a job, or when booking yourself a ticket to travel somewhere, because all these writing skills are mostly just applied into digital tools and even to devices nowadays. I mean, if you compare back then, they would teach us like how to write a cover letter by hand, or how to type it, you know, and print it. But now everything is done remotely. But still, this is a necessary thing when teaching a writing or a speaking lesson.
All right, that's very interesting, really. And do you allow the students to use artificial intelligence during the research, for example, or as a help?
Well, the topic of AI or artificial intelligence is a very, very sensitive topic for us teachers, because a lot of students already misuse AI. And we tell them many, many times is that do not let AI write for you, because AI is just a large language model, okay? Or an LLM. So a large language model, Yusuf, is that it only absorbs knowledge and then just rewrites it in a fancy way for you without adding anything new or legible in that sense.
Right.
I mean, sure, if you could use AI to assist you in research or when assisting you on how to formulate your ideas for writing, this is actually a much better solution than having it write something for you. And by the way, there now in this current age, a lot of research scientists who are into STEM education, you know, which focuses on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, who are, you know, researching AI in education. A lot of them say is that we really, really need to regulate AI to the point there are actually colleges and universities and schools outside of Kuwait where they have students write their essays by hand, just to prevent cheating. It has gone to this level, I mean.
Yeah.
And when I say this is that I'm sure there are schools who have put you know, like Wi-Fi blockers so they couldn't access ChatGPT when using laptops in school, but still that won't work because they already have ChatGPT downloaded on their desktop, and that way they can bypass it.
Yes. All right. Well, I know you restricted kind of the usage of artificial intelligence, but keeping up with the pace of technology, this is the new thing. You know, like how mobile phones came to life. Now artificial intelligence also came to life. So as Nawaf Almahdi, an English instructor here in our beautiful Kuwait, what do you recommend for parents, for example, to provide their children with technology so they can use it online during these classes?
Well, I don't really recommend giving kids technology nowadays because a lot of kids nowadays have really, really low attention spans. Okay, and this has been affecting teachers too, by the way. I do believe in proper supervision. Parents should really sit with their kids during classes and supervise them, because I can tell you, okay, even when it comes to high school students, okay, I'm sure there are very intelligent, independent students, but that doesn't mean they won't be slacking off. Even because I believe, I don't have kids yet, but I'm telling you, if I become a parent one day, I will be making sure that my kid or my child will be sitting in front of the flipped classroom from A to Z, even if they are in grade 12, because they're not 18 yet. And it is my responsibility to make sure they get proper education.
All right.
And after the flipped classroom, they should turn off the devices for at least 2 hours, or just 1 hour minimum. Do something that is non-tech related. By developing hobbies, developing reading skills, learning a specific trade or a skill that could help them later on in life. In that sense.
Yes, inshallah, Nawaf Almahdi. I'm sure everybody here in Kuwait has a different approach towards their children and trying to actually learn during these online beneficial classes. So, dear viewers, we shall take this next report. Stay tuned, and we shall return with Nawaf Almahdi to ask him some more questions. Welcome back, dear viewers, and on this beautiful evening we're still joined by Nawaf Almahdi, an English instructor here in our beautiful Kuwait. And Nawaf, we want to ask you more about students and their pre-tasks that are given to them. How can they manage it effectively and build on it?
What do you mean by pre-tasks, Yusuf? Can you elaborate?
I think the teachers, they give them tasks.
Oh yeah.
So they have to prepare for the classroom online.
Oh yeah, okay. I wouldn't say tasks, but more like tips that could help learners navigate a little bit more towards teams. I think having a secure internet connection is the first priority, and having a safe environment that is, avoiding noise from your surrounding environment is very important, especially when concentrating during the lesson. But some of the other tips I could give to parents is that always make sure your child is always trying to focus during the lesson, and if they have any questions, they can ask by typing in the chat, or asking the teacher by mic or speaking in that sense.
All right, and we know Nawaf Almahdi, in your flipped classroom, there's this something called CEFR for abilities. Would you please explain more on that?
Okay, now the thing with CEFR, which is the Common European Framework for Foreign Languages. Now, this is an educational scale that was deployed by the University of Cambridge as a way to classify learners and their linguistic abilities for learning a foreign language. Flipped classrooms can be good for differentiated learning, which is having a mixed ability classroom. It can be good, but at the same time it does have its cons, because usually in a differentiated learning classroom, you need to be aware of what kind of learning differences the learners have. Some of them will have different intelligences, like kinesthetic learners are different from visual learners. Some of them are different from the analytical ones, and the other ones being more logical. So trying to employ the UDL, which is the Universal Design Learning, which is a learning architecture model where we design lessons that could fit almost all of these intelligences, and making it mixed and varied so the students wouldn't be bored, but they can learn at the same time.
That's very interesting, really, and really a deep subject, Nawaf Almahdi here. I'm sure our dear viewers are more interested about this topic with your knowledge, of course. And we want to know more about the EFL learning method and the assessment of teachers during the assignments of the students.
Well, assessing learners in a flipped classroom can be a bit challenging. I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit challenging because using formative assessments, which is like evaluating the learner during the lesson, which is it's important, but at the same time having a summative assessment, which is examining them at the end of the period, or at the end, assigning quizzes, or at the midterms or final exams. These are summative assessments because you examine them at the end of the course to understand they understood the subject and the topic itself. Other types of assessment, it includes error correction while speaking lessons, and also checking their answers when teaching grammar or vocabulary or language functions.
All right, I'm sure this is different from the traditional style. I remember in the classroom days I used to participate much, and the teacher gives me more marks. Does this happen online?
Oh yeah, it does actually, it does.
All right, that's pretty great to hear, dear viewers. And we want to know the impact of the learners and how they can be affected confidently and also their cognitive minds during this flipped class method.
Okay, so the flipped classroom does have its pros and cons. Some of the pros, it can really help reach learners who are living far away or live in remote areas and cannot commute back and forth into the traditional schools. But some of the cons, like I said, it has to be if you have an unstable internet connection, the cognitive load on the students' minds can be a bit challenging, especially in this generation. The cognitive load is a term we also use in teaching foreign languages because you don't want to overwhelm the learner with too many tasks at the same time. You have to scaffold them one by one, and each stage has a different way of presenting the specific task. In addition to this, part of the cognitive load for the learner is that you have to make sure that the lessons you're teaching fits their language level. It has to be a bit more challenging, but not the way that it becomes too difficult on them and not too easy so they can become bored in that sense.
Okay, and from your point of view, Nawaf Almahdi, we want to know the future of teaching in a flipped classroom. Is this methodology going to continue into the future?
Well, I believe so, yeah. I mean, with the new emerging technologies, I believe it's becoming more imminent in that sense. But there are a lot of education experts who do agree that having a traditional classroom is still a best fit because learners really need to learn how to engage with each other in person. Doing it online can be a bit, misleading.
All right, and I'm sure, to be honest, I would have loved to have studied online. I'm sure everybody's loving it here in our beautiful Kuwait.
Oh yeah.
Staying close to their parents and doing their daily routines maybe at home,
I guess
while also learning in these classes. So Nawaf, what would you advise people who are wanting to start teaching online in these flipped classrooms?
Well, some of the advice I could give for this methodology and using the flipped classroom is always try to sharpen your IT skills, because a lot of teachers nowadays they have to learn a lot of IT related skills for teaching online. In addition to learning how to utilize educational technology, you can search online on YouTube and Google the new methodologies of teaching and how to apply it in a flipped classroom. In addition to this, you can also learn how to use PowerPoint a lot more effectively, how to use online games, like Kahoot, for example, or WordWall as an example, and how to employ AI into coordinating lesson design. But you also have to add your own human element. Like, okay, you can let ChatGPT design a lesson for you, but you need to proofread the lesson is correct or not, because you have to add the human element. Because, like I said, ChatGPT can make mistakes sometimes in that sense.
Yes, it does actually make some mistakes and also repeats your answers again and again.
It does, yes.
And you have to pay for it, I think, to get more answers out of it.
Absolutely.
So more about the flipped learning classrooms, Nawaf, and people wanting to approach this method. Do you see a more international approach that you can teach more students maybe in the GCC region and not just in Kuwait?
Absolutely. I've actually designed online courses for not just on Kuwait's level, but also on the GCC level. I've taught a lot of EFL classrooms online. I mean, as a way to help learners abroad learn English comfortably while also from at home in that sense. And most of the courses I deliver online are also through legitimate institutes in Kuwait. And I even developed an online course called How to Teach Writing to High School Students on Tadarrab, the company Tadarrab, which is a Kuwaiti company that focuses on corporate training and education experts.
That's very interesting and great of you, Nawaf. Now we want to hear your point of view while facing these students, mashallah, online. I'm sure you're learning a lot about their habits, maybe their routines, and how they react while they're at home with their parents' surroundings. What's the most valuable lesson that you have learned from our beautiful students online?
Believe it or not, if your students love you, you'll be able to stay in touch with them whether they're in person or online. I think that's some of the benefits I've received as a teacher when teaching online. My students really like me, and to me that's very important, because whenever a student likes you, they'll become more engaged into your lessons and so on and so forth.
Yes, mashallah. And Nawaf Almahdi, we really like your appearance here on Hala Kuwait. We enjoyed many discussions with you, and inshallah soon we will have you more with us here to explain more things.
Hopefully, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you, Yusuf, for being an amazing host.
You're most welcome. Therefore, dear viewers, let's all thank the coming of Nawaf Almahdi, an English instructor here in our beautiful Kuwait. And next, dear viewers, we have this interesting report coming up, so stay tuned.